Hello, I'm Jim Cornell, and this is Base to Base, the weekly biotech podcast from Air Coastal Media. Yes, welcome again to the Base to Base Biotech podcast, and this episode is going out on April the 25th. Easter is over, the changeable weather is back here, and it's almost May already. Not too many press releases and communications because of the long Easter weekend, and in the UK next weekend we have another holiday. I have an infection in my nose which isn't affecting anything other than my perception of myself, which right now makes me think I look a little like Pinocchio, or maybe more appropriately a proboscis monkey. If you did miss last week's podcast, I'm not going to get annoyed, but please do check it out over at deeptechdigest.com or via your favourite podcast app. And as a reminder, the two interviews were with Vitalant, talking about all things blood, and with Brainomics, with a conversation about how AI is helping people who have suffered from a stroke. If you have suggestions for guests, please do get in touch at jim@deeptechdigest.com. And I'm pleased to say lots of people are doing that. This week we're talking with Persica Pharmaceuticals CEO Steve Ruston about a new treatment for chronic low back pain. But first, we're talking about a new collaboration between Lithuanian company CASzyme, Nsage and Vilnius University, who have joined forces to form a consortium to develop a new advanced diagnostics solution. The Uncover project will develop a universal CRISPR-based diagnostics platform for accurate and rapid detection of infectious diseases. To tell us about the project, the consortium, and CASzyme is CASzyme's co-founder and CEO, Dr. Monika Paulė. So I guess the first thing then is if you could tell me a little about the history of the company.
Yeah, so we founded CASzyme already 8 years ago in 2017. And my scientific co-founders, they've been working in the CRISPR field for almost 20 years. So they were one of these first pioneers who picked up the topic before CRISPR gene editing was popular. And they had various collaborations with industry throughout the years. And we just realized in 2016 that there is, so much of the opportunity to do more of the application of CRISPR gene editing, or sharing all the knowledge that we have, that the technology would be really widely accessible in the market and could develop further. So we decided to establish CASzyme, and throughout the years, we've been working on multiple research and development collaborations with companies from therapeutics, agriculture, research tools, diagnostics, on developing novel gene editing tools, on solving all kinds of challenges, improving the existing technologies and tools, but also built our own platform of gene editing modalities that we now offer for out-licensing in the therapeutic field, and really try to establish like a broad network of companies that could use it and build their own therapeutic pipelines. But also because we realized what a good platform we have to capture more value and to show, the clinical proof, we started to build our own pipeline in therapeutics, but also in diagnostics, because we've been working in this area also almost for the whole time CASzyme was established.
You mentioned partnerships, and you're going to be collaborating with Nsage and Vilnius University. Could you tell me a little bit about that partnership?
Absolutely. So we've been collaborating with different research groups at Vilnius University for quite some time, because it's a huge hub of the fundamental research and discoveries in the CRISPR field. But also we have this pretty long-term relationship with Dr. Gintautas Tamulaitis, who leads this group at Vilnius University, and they've been discovering novel gene editing enzymes, in particularly for the diagnostics field. So we, saw like a mutual interest and possibility to collaborate. Whereas this Korean company and Sage, we also know them for quite some time. We collaborated on the development of some also novel gene editors. And they also have an interest in the diagnostics field. They have some IP there. So we saw like a very nice fit where all three parties bring their IP, their knowledge. And if we put all of that together, we can really make a very universal, effective CRISPR-based diagnostic platform, not only for humans, but also for animals.
What is Uncover and how does that work?
All of our project is called Uncover
Okay.
because we received some of the governmental funding for this collaboration because Vilnius University that is involved, and of course they need some support to be actively involved and do the research and development. So we needed a name. We called that Uncover, but we also called the platform for now Uncover, but maybe we'll come up with some more marketing friendly word later on the
Ah,
commercialization stage.
all right. Could you explain a bit more about what it addresses and what you're trying to do with that?
Yeah, so we want to develop a CRISPR-based diagnostic platform, which would be used for accurate and rapid detection, first of all, of infectious diseases. And initially, we're focusing on infectious disease just because it's, from the scientific point of view, easier to test. But also, infectious diseases are the ones who emerge unexpectedly. So that's something that is very good to test your platform on. But we want to make it easy programmable that we could later use it for a very wide range of different disease biomarkers, different pathogens, and in that case, make it easily transformable for different human and animal indications. That, let's say, if something new emerges, some kind of new disease, a new pathogen, we could easily adapt our platform for it.
And so what advantages would that have over current methods?
Current methods are not always so precise. And that's also, it's actually very important when you have to make a decision, let's say, on certain treatment or vaccines application and things like that. Also, this sensitivity and specificity, as we say, because there are these available tests in the markets, but very often they are neither very sensitive nor specific. And if we really want to have like a very specific, sensitive result in the diagnostics, then we have to go to the lab and do, let's say, qPCR test, which is not easy to use and not not cost efficient. Whereas our platform would be at the same time easy to use and quite cost efficient. And with all this very big sensitivity, specificity, also have a speed of, a usual diagnostic test that we are now used to buy in the shop or somewhere.
It's a 3-year project. What are the ultimate goals, I guess, for that project?
So we want to have, as we call it, like a proof of concept of the platform that after the project, we could commercialize through out licensing the platform for diagnostic manufacturers who can make all these devices and tests, but out license in the way that it would be already targeting the pathogens or disease biomarkers they are interested in. So through these kinds of partnerships, we could then, expand the network and commercial potential of our diagnostics, because then we could also, target different regions. We are having NSAGE as a partner. We are thinking about Asian market first. Also, there are quite some established diagnostics companies there which are interested in such kind of tool. But also in that case, we could think about, less developed markets as well, which actually very much need easy to use, quite cheap, but also very precise diagnostic solutions because they don't have any kind of more advanced options.
I guess that would be a massive benefit for those people using it. Or are there any other benefits that people that you'll be licensing this to will achieve?
I would say, all these technical benefits are the ones which are really driving us and driving potential partners because we might be used to having these easy accessible, simple tests for, like as now we say simple infectious disease, but all the rest of the market, it's not really saturated with sophisticated, but at the same time, easily accessible diagnostic tools.
Is it something that you're leading the field in, or are there other companies and universities studying this too?
Of course, there has been quite a lot of efforts in the CRISPR diagnostics, especially during the COVID times. But I think our uniqueness is in the way that we combine different technologies that all of us bring and all this expertise of gene editing tools engineering and all this AI application on developing really the best gene editing enzymes for the diagnostics that could actually help us to achieve all of these characteristics, technical characteristics that we want to have, where a lot of other companies or consortiums were struggling.
We've been talking about this specific project, but are there any other projects that Caszyme is involved in, either alone or collaboratively?
We are now a part of this diagnostics collaboration. We are focusing on expanding the potential of our gene editing tools platform. So we have developed a very novel nuclease. It's called Cas12L, where L stands for Lithuania. So we were lucky to get the letter, which also represents our country. But we engineered the nuclease to the level that it could be very also effectively and efficiently applied in the therapeutic field as a modality for gene editing based therapeutics or cell therapies. We are now focusing on generating some preclinical data to show how well it works. But what is very important in the therapeutics field, it's what's your editing efficiency, and we are reaching up to 100%, which is really a unique thing in the market. And we are collaborating with therapeutics companies that are already applying it. So let's say we have a very nice, also quite long-term collaboration with Spanish company Integra Therapeutics, also an amazing team, very strong scientists behind it. And they are using our tool for rare pediatric disease, which is very important for our young generation to have all these therapeutic solutions, but also collaborating with our main hospital in the CAR-T space, which also would have a very direct benefit for the patients.
I know you're based in Lithuania, hence the 12L, but are there a lot of companies in the sort of the biotech space in the Vilnius area?
The biotech industry or life science industry, as we call it, is actually growing a lot, especially during the last 5 years, I would say. A lot of new companies emerging, ranging through all the industry from, very deep tech oriented, let's say like us, which are involved in discovery of novel modalities to more AI based companies on improvement of different modalities or focusing more to the bioeconomy or agri-tech space or preclinical development. So actually, really, the industry is growing. And this September, we will have our biannual event, Life Science Politics, already happening for more than 10 years, which gathers all the industry and shows all the achievements within not only our country but the region as such.
You mentioned AI. Has that and some of the other developments within the field, has that impacted on your work?
Absolutely, yes, because AI is first of all about what can you do with your data. And we have throughout the years generated a lot of very good data on the research that we did. So we use machine learning and AI mainly in two areas. One area is discovery phase. So, when we are looking for novel gene editing tools, there we can use not only the data that we have, but also all the know-how, because it helps us to build the models that we can use. And also in the engineering part of the already existing tool, because we say that we are sometimes like a plastic surgeons, because we have the gene editing tool, and we engineer it to the tool which actually does what, let's say, you expect it to do or what you need it to do. And here is also where, through AI and through all the data knowledge that we have, we can build really very impressive models that give very impressive results.
Interesting to hear about companies and universities working together, and the Uncover project does sound like it's going to be very impressive. Another case of watch this space, I guess. Now we're moving to something that many people have experienced, and that is back pain. In this case, chronic low back pain. One company that is developing a potentially transformative non-opioid treatment for chronic low back pain is Persica Pharmaceuticals, and the company also has some interesting Phase 1b data. To tell us more is the company's CEO, Steve Ruston. So first, I wonder if then you could give me a bit of the history of Persica Pharmaceuticals so far.
Sure. Well, Persica was set up as a new company back in 2013, and it was created then with the intention of bringing forward a new, different treatment for chronic back pain. And I was asked to become its CEO when the company was founded, and we put together a small team of experienced pharmaceutical development executives who brought a lot of experience from their previous roles in the industry. And the view was that we would set a company up with a small number of people at the nucleus, complemented by a number of long-term partnerships to do the different functions of drug development. In a major company, all of those functions would be in-house. We're a small company. Biotech companies don't have the resources to have all of that in-house on a long-term basis. So our model was to bring on board people that would help us with the different phases of drug development as and when we needed them. And that's what we've been running since we started.
Chronic lower back pain is one of the conditions, I guess, that you're looking at. How much of an issue is that?
Well, back pain in general it's a huge issue. It's global. It probably costs the healthcare systems as much or more as many of the other diseases combined. Once you get beyond a certain age, most people have either had it in some form or another or know somebody who's got it. But chronic back pain is a very serious condition. It often doesn't benefit from established methods of treatment, and it can cause really significant levels of pain and, even more importantly, disability. And those patients impacted with that have often few treatment options unless they respond to the initial approaches of analgesia or perhaps manipulation and things like that. But most of the patients we're trying to help don't respond to those preliminary stages of treatment and have few attractive options. And that was something that we wanted to do something about right from the outset.
And I would assume that there are different levels of back pain and also different sources for the back pain itself. Does that make any difference to the way that it's treated?
You're quite right. There are different levels. So our target patient population experience what's called moderate to severe chronic back pain. Chronic, as the name implies, means they've had it for a long time. And, if you go and pull a muscle digging the garden, that's a short-term acute problem, which probably will resolve. Those with the chronic condition, that can be something that develops over a long period of time. And many of our patients, or patients that we're hoping to be able to help, have this problem for years. We've just completed a clinical trial with our new drug, And one of those groups of patients, on average, had been living with this for over 5 years. So it's a real problem, and it's not a short-term fix for many of these guys.
So what's been your approach to tackling it differently to other companies?
Yeah, so we were set up after some groundbreaking medical research, academic research, that showed certain patients, their condition was caused by an infection in the spine, a new concept at the time. And we had a look at that and thought, actually, we can bring forward a new drug, a treatment, a regimen that will address that problem. The academic research, while it was a breakthrough, came with a number of problems. They needed very long-term treatment, very high-dose antibiotics. It causes all sorts of problems with side effects, or it's difficult to keep people on the study if you have to take it for 100 days, which is what was originally done. And there's also the problems associated with growing antibiotic resistance. So our aim was to develop a very short course treatment, low doses, low side effects, and gets right to the heart of the problem. And that's what we've been able to do. And
how does it actually work in the body?
So we dose a well-known and clinically precedented antibiotic in a specially developed drug formulation, which is delivered by injection directly to the site of where the infection is in the spine. These are simple day case procedures. You have just 2 injections in the first week of the treatment, and then that knocks out the infection, and then the healing following removing the infection allows the reduction in inflammation and bone degradation that you see once the infection is there. When those reductions take place over a period of time, there's a significant reduction in pain and disability.
I guess one of the biggest issues has been addiction to painkillers. Is that something that...
Yeah, it's a huge problem. The opioid crisis is obviously getting a lot of publicity. So this is absolutely a non-opioid treatment for chronic pain. It's a simple antibiotic delivered, as I said, in a special formulation, which allows a localized dose of the antibiotic for several days of effective coverage, and that's the end of the treatment. So there's every prospect that if you reduce pain and you reduce disability, the need for long-term analgesics, including opioids, should reduce. And it's most definitely not a different opioid for treating pain. So we think this will have a lot of advantages, a lot of attractions, not just for the effect on the patients, but the opioid crisis is something that many people are worried about, and our approach gets you away from that issue.
And is it something that would need to be repeated over time, or are you looking to get rid of the pain and that's the end of it?
So our treatment is given in the first week of the course, and then we follow patients for a year, and there's a substantial continued reduction in pain and disability through that 12-month period. And we believe that unless there's a specific issue with the patient, the majority are unlikely to relapse. So we do not see the need at the moment anyway for multiple repeat doses of the antibiotic if it continues to work in the way that we believe it will and what we expect it to do. We will need to test that in larger trials going forward, but so far the indications are that if you kill the infection, it's unlikely to reoccur unless there's a specific physical event with the individual subject.
Speaking of trials, where are you currently at on that pathway?
So we've just completed a phase 1b study, and although it's termed phase 1b, it also was powered to show efficacy in terms of reducing pain and disability. That trial was done in 4 countries, and the results are very impressive. It's a relatively small study, but it achieved all the primary outcomes that the trial was set up to do. We're delighted with the results. We're now planning for a progression to what we would call registrational studies, probably phase 3 studies. By definition, they will be larger. At least one of those will need to be in the United States, and that's the development plan going forward. So progression to those studies, if they give us the same results, which we are appropriately confident that they will, that should allow for regulatory approval for this to become an approved medicine.
Often with anything related to pain medication or treating pain or infections, cost tends to be an issue? What is your approach in terms of both cost and being able to produce at scale?
So first, on the cost issue, we're using a long-established antibiotic, which is available as a generic medicine. So we've not had to bear the cost of bringing forward a new molecule and all the associated additional testing that would be required for such an entity. We can go in the back of some 20 years of clinical experience with this antibiotic that was originally developed, I think, in Pfizer. All the other components of our drug are also clinically approved. So the requirements for the regulators going forward will be less onerous than if it was a brand new molecule. They're all available as commodity products or generic products. So the cost of treatment, we don't know exactly what it's going to be. We've done some preliminary market assessment on that, but the cost of treatment will be low compared to the cost of years and years of disability, loss of work, or more expensive surgery, which is where some of these patients end up eventually. So going forward, there will be a big benefit for healthcare systems compared to the current alternatives. In terms of manufacture, coming with our big pharma experience, we wanted to make sure that the supply chain was sufficient and credible and with the right quality to produce much larger quantities for the phase 3 studies and eventually launch supplies. So we have a process which is in good shape for continued development and scale up. So manufacture of the drug in the future will not be an issue.
What's the timeline looking like for the company and also for the next steps that you need to take?
So the next steps would be to continue to plan for scaling up from the number of patients that we've done to date. We did the study in 4 countries, 3 in UK and Europe, and plus New Zealand. As I mentioned earlier, we will absolutely need to go to the United States. It's the biggest market, and you need to get through the regulatory approval with the FDA. So the next step in the short term is to go to that authority for their advice and guidance on the size and shape and requirements of phase 3 trials. That's a well-characterized process of engagement. We're about to start that. But we do have our own thoughts on what would be a reasonable number of patients and other requirements that the regulators, not just in the US, but elsewhere, will need. We are working on a manufacturing process, just a few refinements to make sure that it's capable of being scaled. And then we need a partner to help support us fund these activities because it's a costly exercise. But we think the quality of the data from the first study, we believe that should be an attractive proposition. If things go well and if the timelines meet our quite aggressive requirements in order to maximize the patent life of the product, we're looking to be a saleable product around 2029, 2030. Still 5 years away, but those are typical timelines for development for a product at this stage. But we now have got the key data that will drive that process forward.
Right. Has that data been published?
Well, we put a press release out announcing the headline results from that, and we are drafting a publication as we speak. So the intention is to publicise that through such a publication, hopefully later this year.
And hopefully that leads to the discussions and the funding that you're looking for.
We've been in dialogue with potentially interested parties for some time. This is not a quick process, but our approach has generated a lot of intrigue because it is so different. Nobody else is doing, as far as we're aware, injectable antibiotics for back pain. Because it's such a novel approach, and because back pain is such a common problem as we've discussed, there is a level of intrigue. But of course, not every pharmaceutical company or other potentially interested partner works in pain. So we're targeting a number of organisations that we think this will be of interest to. Now we have our data in hand. We expect to intensify those conversations in the short to medium term future.
Why do you think it is that nobody had ever taken this approach before?
That's a really good question. I think back in the time when the original academic research was being done, it was a very novel concept then. There were people who thought that the evidence for bacteria being in the spine, which was something discovered when people undergoing surgical procedures, if they were having discs removed under surgery, bacteria were discovered in those removed discs. The thought in certain quarters was, well, actually, they're not really in there. It's just contamination during the surgery. But That has been comprehensively disproved by people nothing to do with our company. But it was challenging orthodox thinking, and it's quite a conservative profession sometimes. And then there were issues around large-scale use of antibiotics, all the associated worries about antibiotic resistance. That at the time caused some blowback. We're way over that. We only use very small doses of antibiotic. It's not an issue anymore. There's very credible evidence that the infection is a real thing. And, our clinical trials prove that. But it wouldn't be the first time there's been a medical breakthrough that was not fully embraced at the start. Ulcers were also caused by a bacterial infection, Helicobacter pylori, for example. And that wasn't very well received when it was first mooted either, many years ago now. But that was then. We're in a different place now, and we're really focused on demonstrating the benefits to patients of what we're trying to do.
I think it's not dissimilar to the discussion that was had over the gut microbiome at one stage, where people thought that was irrelevant to all kinds of health conditions. And now here we are, where it's still not necessarily 100% well understood, but certainly those connections are made now, whereas they weren't in the past.
No, that's exactly right. And, like I say, it is sometimes a conservative profession. Sometimes there are vested interests that might have good reasons for being resistant to change. That's just the way human nature works sometimes, isn't it? But in the end, if it does work as we expect it to, there will be a lot of people who will then say, of course, I always believed in it. That's also the way human nature works. But 10 years ago, this was absolutely unique to a small group of researchers. That's not the case now. And as what we're doing gets more and more publicity and traction, which it is getting, I think it will be much more about what are our data saying, what is the potential, not the fundamental premise of, is there an infection in there?
Those are really the only questions I had. Is there anything that you wanted to cover that we didn't mention?
The fundamental point here is that there are a large number of patients who have very limited treatment options. They either have to live with it for a long time. In many cases, they give up on trying new approaches. They've had the condition for years, not much works, or they have to end up having much more aggressive surgical intervention, spinal fusion, for example, very costly, sometimes to show some benefit, but it's not a procedure you would want to undergo unless there was absolutely no alternative. And we believe that if the work we've done so far is borne out as we expect it to with the bigger trials and on into the market, we can make a real difference. And this is a global problem. Every country has got chronic back pain. There are millions of patients out there that we think our approach will be able to help. And we know for sure that those who respond to the antibiotic treatment, the response is hugely significant on an individual basis. And therefore, this approach has got the ability to really help a very large number of patients with enormous benefits in reduction of not just pain and disability, but cost to the healthcare system. So thank you very much for the opportunity of speaking with me today. I really appreciate that. And watch this space. We'll look forward to further conversations on future developments.
If you've ever had back pain, you know how difficult it can be to treat, and of course those suffering with chronic back pain really do need some good news, and hopefully this is it. If you have questions or comments or suggestions for guests, please do get in touch, and you can do so at jim@deeptechdigest.com. Interviews are already done for the next few weeks, so now it's really just a case of choosing which ones for next week. So until next time, wherever in the world you are, I hope you have a great week. Thanks for listening, and I hope you'll join us again next week for another Base to Base Biotech podcast. The Base to Base Biotech podcast is an Air Coastal Media Limited production.